Good morning, Neil Howard. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you, Sean. Good to see you.
I'm very excited today to have you on our episode here. For the audience that doesn't know Neil, Neil is a the CEO of the IBI Group Holdings based out of Hong Kong. I'm welcoming him here today to kind of speak about his experience as well as give us any advice in this kind of world, this turbulent world we're in at the moment right now. Really appreciate his time. And maybe you can just kick off, Neil, with giving us a bit of background on who you are, what's IBI Group Holdings, and a little bit about your journey and how you got to where you are.
Sure, absolutely fantastic. Yeah, so I'm the chairman and CEO of IBI Group Holdings, which is a Hong Kong-based company. I'm originally from the UK, but I'm a long-term Hong Konger. So I've been in Hong Kong for 30 years now, which is almost a lifetime. I started off my time in the UK and left shortly after university after studying commercial side of construction, and moved to Hong Kong at the tender age of 25. And after various different career moves in Hong Kong, I've ended up being the sort of majority owner and CEO and chairman of IBI. IBI is a predominantly a property and construction company. So we specialize in very high-end fit outs, large building modification jobs, and we also have a property investment portfolio and finally a sort of high-tech building products division as well. So a little bit of variation, but all around construction and all around property. That's our main focus.
Excellent. And so you said you're not originally from Hong Kong, and just thinking back to that time when you moved out, what was the reason why you decided on Hong Kong of all places in the world to leave when you left England? What was the attraction there?
Yeah, it was great times. I mean, it was a little bit slow in the UK. They were just in the middle of a bit of a recessionary period, and so Hong Kong was actually booming. They were building the new airport at the time and all the approach roads out to it, which is a massive, massive project. And they were looking for people from different areas of the world, particularly the UK, because of its construction excellence, to come out and help. So after just coming out of university, only one year I think it was, I put some applications in and unexpectedly got accepted. So before I knew it, I was packing my bags and on a plane out to somewhere which I really, apart from knowing it had its reputation for cheap electronics, I really didn't know much else about it. So it was exciting times.
I'm always fascinated by people that take that leap, right? So I'm obviously you can hear from my accent, I'm an American, but I'm actually based in Melbourne, Australia at the moment. So, and having lived in Southeast Asia, and we met. I think the first time we met was in Hong Kong, so that was probably in let's say pre-handover, let's pre-97. Really fascinated about why people decide to make that jump from their home country where things are quite known and the culture is a certain thing you're used to. So just what was it about you that you decided it wasn't just the economic opportunity, but there's something about you that said I'm a risk taker, and I'm just wondering if that has something that you've kind of experienced in your life as you've gone forward. What's different between you and the average person that decides to just kind of stay where they're at?
I guess it's I mean, a risk taker is probably a bit of a fancy word to call it. It's I think at the time when you're making these decisions, you don't necessarily think about it in the same level of detail as when you look back. But things were a little average in the UK at that particular time, particularly in my industry. I seem to remember everybody getting excited about getting a company car, but you were given a choice. You could have a cigarette lighter or a rear windscreen wiper, but you couldn't have both. And that seemed to me, even at the age of 24, 25, that seemed a little bit limited. And so when I heard some people talking about these opportunities in Hong Kong, it seemed to me like the right choice. And I guess for me personally, I had a lot of connections in the UK. I had a lot of really good friends and an excellent lifestyle. But I was prepared to give that up short term. That seemed to me like a reasonable decision to make. And at the time, it was only considered to be a 2-year posting. So, like a lot of people out here who stay a long time, the risk level was not crazy. It was 2 years, sacrifice, move away from your comfort zone, and then come back home with a bit of money in your pocket and get on to life as normal. But obviously, that didn't quite happen.
And I think that's something quite interesting. I talk to a lot of leaders, and they say getting out of your comfort zone and and exploring new things and having that kind of mindset around innovation and change and always looking forward is something that probably allows them to get those experiences that put them into leadership positions. I think that's probably one of the important or one of the key messages I think I'd send to people is try things out of your comfort zone.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um,
Yeah, I think
so you're
I think
CEO.
you've got to be careful. You've got to be careful not to sink into too much regularity. I think you do have to find new things. You do have to speak to new people. And when you stay in one place your whole life, I think elements of that do fade away. So I'm a big believer in meeting new people and going to new places. Of course, you've got to remember, 30 years ago I moved here, so some would say I fell into just a different comfort zone. So I've had 30 years in Hong Kong. It depends on where you look at it.
So now, but if you think about Hong Kong and looking at recent history, even if you think about when we first met, pre this late '90s, Hong Kong has gone through massive changes, right? Change of government, handed back to China. It's also experienced lots of disruptions. There's obviously the political side, but if you look at things like the economy, COVID, of course, was a huge impact to not just Hong Kong, everywhere around the world, and I'm sure that's had impacts to you as well. So with all of those changes, even though people say, maybe you've moved to a new country, that there's actually not a new country, but a new location. Having moved to a new place and then having to go through all those cycles of change, that is probably getting out of your comfort zone. So thinking back to the pandemic, how did that impact you? Obviously, it wasn't much. I'm assuming there wasn't much building, and that must have impacted your business quite a lot.
I know everything was carrying on. I mean, I would never say like normal, but there wasn't a day that I couldn't go into the office. There wasn't a day when the transportation system wasn't fully operational. There wasn't a day that you couldn't go into a restaurant and eat out. So Hong Kong, every country dealt with the pandemic in a different way. But Hong Kong did manage to keep things open and did manage to keep things running. So you may go from obviously going to a restaurant with 10 of your friends. At the worst point, I think we were limited to 2 people per table. The restaurant may be limited to 50% capacity. But really, other than that, it was the mask wearing, it was the hygiene element, and the track and trace that were probably more impactful during our time in Hong Kong. You could always travel outside of Hong Kong. You could always travel back into Hong Kong. It's a lot of people don't realize just how well the government did in keeping things up and running. You know, it, like everybody, it was brand new. It was a brand new thing. So mistakes were made, but at the end of the day, I think if I look across the world, they did a pretty good job.
Yeah, I was in Melbourne, so we were quite probably the most locked down city in the world. So yeah, but that's for another time, another story.
Yeah.
But so yeah, other than the since the pandemic, you've been focused on investing. I understand you have some investment properties overseas as well. It's not just Hong Kong based. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. So we're always looking, from a risk profile, we're always looking to manage our risk, to bring in some diversification, because at the very core, we are a construction company, and that is the main part of the business. But looking to diverse, so we've recently, or a couple of years ago now, bought a property in Dublin, in Ireland. Dublin is a financial hub. Lots of international companies there have headquarters, normally from a tax perspective, for their businesses in Europe. So we've bought ourselves a 20,000 square foot commercial property, and we've been spending the last 2 years upgrading, realigning our tenants, bringing a Hong Kong style service mentality to the ownership of a commercial building. And so that's been very exciting. It's been great to have something outside of Hong Kong, and the buildings, the investment's going very, very well. So despite the fluctuations in commercial real estate values generally, we're sitting on a 100% occupied building with great tenants and good rents, and the whole thing is going very well. So we're very pleased with that investment.
So there's a lot of companies that do similar business as you, but you said something very interesting just now. You said it's the Hong Kong level of service. Can you elaborate a little bit more on what makes that different for you versus other businesses, other construction businesses?
Sure. I think Hong Kong is somewhat renowned for its service quality. I mean, if you go into a hotel here, you go into a restaurant here, we're very used to very fast, efficient service. And from a hospitality point of view, a very high level of service. And this is something, we take a little bit for granted in Hong Kong, but we do feel that when we go to other places in the world, that level of service is just not there. We try to bring that mentality, that client focus, or in the case of a building, a tenant focus mentality, where we're trying to do as much as we can for people who we service and do it in a very efficient way. So we tend to find that we're moving at 100 miles an hour, and not everybody's moving at 100 miles an hour in the locations that we do business, but we're certainly going to maintain that level of service and speed and efficiency and response time, and we find it's very much appreciated. It's noticed, and
Do you see a lot of that being just naturally part of the culture, but also what do you do to kind of embed that into your team to make sure that they are providing that high level of service? Maybe there's a different level of expectations if you're saying you're in an overseas market versus in a local market in terms of the service levels. Like I noticed when I was working with high-end hospitality, the level of service that they would provide, say in Thailand, that sense of, it's almost like a guest is God mentality, just like to help the guests do everything you can to give them the best possible experience. And then, yes, in other countries, you don't get that sense. It's a bit more individualistic. It's a bit more, you're on your own. We'll give you the tools. But and there's reasons for that, right? Cost of labor is
yeah.
different in many countries. But from a Hong Kong perspective, from your company perspective, what do you do to make sure that that level of service or that mentality is instilled in the team members that you work with?
Yeah, I think it comes naturally to Hong Kong people. Hong Kong people are incredibly hardworking. They are very dedicated. They have a natural sense of ownership for what they're doing, and that's a great base to start off with. After that, you're really just refining it. You're just rounding off some of the corners and directing their attention to certain areas. But I find I think part of the reason why I fell in love with Hong Kong very quickly was this hard-working mentality. We still have a focus on the team. We still have a focus on the majority here, not such a obsessive focus on the individual, which allows people to service properly. I think if you're constantly worried about your own situation and your own feelings, it's very difficult to serve, with 100% effort. So it's we just keep reinforcing it. It's response times. It's quality of response. It's following up on things, not letting things slide, and also trying to bring in a level of accuracy to everything. So avoid sloppy mistakes, avoid careless errors, these types of these things. And if that does happen, you jump on it straight away and you apologize and do your best to correct it. That thing is just constantly.
That's a great point. Is being able to say I was wrong and I made a mistake and here's how I'll rectify it. And I think that whole what we would call in hospitality would be service recovery, right?
Yes.
It would be like give the guest even better experience after they've gone through something that was a negative experience. Not just meet them where it was, but just go beyond that to show them that they are valued and give them that customer that improve that relationship that you have with the
I
customer.
mean, this is the
And that doesn't just go.
this is the last thing that they will remember of you. I mean, you typically, certainly in our industry, it's one project at a time, and that may be the last thing they remember of you is that you recovered from a bad situation, and you stayed up late, you stuck in the hours, you were on site, you were doing everything you could to make it happen for them. And that's what they see and that's what they remember.
So on a given project, I'm sure you're working not obviously with your internal team, but you've got a number of partners, suppliers, others that you work with to make sure that things get done, in a legal, regulatory, and quick manner, on budget, on time, and all the rest. So what do you do to help build those relationships with your partnerships? Is there any particular strategies you use or things that people can take away from your experience?
Yeah, and we treat our suppliers and our partners just like we treat our staff, and we have longevity as a result of it. So we still have some members of staff here from the early days when the company was founded. We have a very high retention level of senior management. And we try and do the same with a lot of our suppliers and our subcontractors, because in our industry, everything is subcontracted, everything is dished out. That's just the way it works here. And so again, it's treating people with respect. It's making sure they get paid. We don't cheat people. They get paid for what they get done, and it's a sense of all being in it together. Just because they're a couple of rungs down from us in the sort of the pecking order doesn't mean that they get treated any differently. It's amazing what paying people will do for loyalty. It's a real bond. It's very simple, but hey, that's what it's about at the end of the day.
Yeah, treating them with respect, making sure because they have obviously families and things that they're relying on and waiting for that payment for sure. So today we're obviously going through a lot of change. There's this move. Let's say there's some political shifts going on, as you've seen in the U.S., and there's going to be some interesting things to happen with the relationship between China and the U.S. So we'll maybe leave that political discussion for another day, but there are also these technological changes, especially in AI. This is an area that I'm quite interested in and how it is impacting different industries. So I do talk with lots of leaders and they all have their own perspectives on how this is impacting them. It could be from a customer service standpoint. It could be from helping them to improve, their selling motions, or, using data in some way to kind of help their processes improve. So when you're looking at this kind of tectonic shift of AI, generative artificial intelligence, how's your company kind of adapting to these evolving things? And what strategies are you putting in place to kind of think about how you navigate this next step?
Yeah, it's funny, there's a huge amount of advances in this whole area, and we just happen to be in an industry where at the end of the day, you need someone physically doing work. Our industry doesn't do well with robots. It doesn't do well with anyone other than skilled operators. And so the advances probably are around our industry more than directly in the production of the end result. And so, for example, a lot of designers are making a huge use of AI tools. With a lot less staff, they can produce very high quality concept designs, which typically would have taken someone many days to produce. So a lot of outsourcing is done still. So rather than necessarily just going all to AI, they may be outsourcing to service centers in the Philippines or to India or to China to get low paid resources to get work carried out. I must admit, our industry at the fitting out level anyway is very resistant to change. It's a lot of skilled individuals who have learned their trade over a number of time, and you can't get a robot to repeat it. And you see, I spend a lot of time on YouTube looking at sites about innovation and a machine that can do plastering and a machine that can put up plywood, or a robotic exoskeleton that can help you support things when you're doing it. All these things are wonderful advancement, but when you're on a 20,000 square foot construction site and you've got 150 people working, there is no smooth path for a robot to work diligently across your site, because in one location you've got people doing the electrics, you've got another person up in the ceiling doing the air conditioning units and air conditioning situation, then you've got someone else installing glass, someone else installing doors. A machine doesn't get the opportunity to walk in there and tiptoe around everybody trying to do what it does. So we're constantly looking.
It's a bit of a chaotic environment, let's say, right?
Absolutely.
Lots of things happening.
Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely. So it's not, we don't get the benefit of a nice, clean, open space where everybody can do their stuff individually. We're doing, at times we could be doing 70, 80,000 square feet of office fit out in, 2.5 months. I'm afraid there's only one way to do that, and that's just slightly managed chaos, if you, for want of a better term.
Do you have suppliers that with things like sustainability becoming more? You see these massive typhoons hit Hong Kong every once in a while, and do you see that there's more and more sensors going in, kind of Internet of Things going into these buildings, and you have to kind of account for that when you're doing the construction, and maybe monitors for certain
Yeah,
things?
well, actually, we're just installing through our building products subsidiary, BSL, that's actually what we're doing at the moment for a number of people, is putting in sensors for water leakage in lift wells. That's something that's becoming quite popular. Part of the reason why we set up BSL was for that side of things. So we have some very energy efficient lighting that comes from a Silicon Valley based company. We're doing a lot of installation for big corporates and also the government, actually, for very, very sort of high quality energy efficient lighting. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of building management systems being sold around, a lot of sensors being put in place. Of course, at the end of the day, there's an awful lot of information. It's what you do with the information that's the most important thing. So you could have 1,000 bits of
Absolutely.
information coming in on a minute by minute basis, but what does that mean? Because at the end of the day, unless you can automate a response to that, you've got a person at the end of a line on a computer staring at 1,000 pieces of information and simply not being able to respond in any meaningful way. So it's a balance. It's a real balance.
So it sounds like the most important technology is still the human technology. And I think looking at the tradespeople, there's, around the world, I've heard stories from others that, and these are anecdotal stories, but I'd love your take on this, that there is a shortage of tradespeople in certain countries. And with that deficit, the cost obviously is going to go up and impact the budgets of these construction projects. So are you seeing that in Hong Kong, especially, post COVID and this, during this whole AI transformation? Are you seeing a lack of people that want to get into the trades?
It's a big problem. It's a big problem for us here. Aging workforce is a very big problem, and it's a difficult one to resolve because although the government have they have a department that deals in training, working with your hands is not in fashion. It's people want to go to work in a suit, they want air conditioning, they want a set lunch break, and they want to work from home. So these things don't really suit working in the construction industry. But you can have a good and well-paid job in the construction industry if you're a skilled operator. You will always be in demand, and so it's a little bit of pushing the promotion of the industry to change people's perception, because I think there's going to be a lot of people losing their jobs in those office-based environments because of machine learning, because of AI, and people are going to have to look elsewhere. Otherwise, they're going to be sat at home doing nothing.
So do you get most of your tradespeople, are they employed by you, or are they all subcontractors? Like how do you set up the model for
Hong
your own
Kong
company?
system is always subcontracted. Very few people have direct tradesmen as employees. And so that actually does complicate the issue even further, because obviously the people that you're dealing with who supply your ceiling workers, your painters, they may all be separate companies. So, and they're not necessarily big companies. So they don't have a budget to invest in the long-term training of employees. So this is where the Hong Kong system doesn't actually encourage that training element, particularly for schools.
So going back to that partnership, you're relying on a lot of the same partners to provide the workers for the construction
Yes.
projects. Is that
Yeah.
where you build out the relationships over time and kind of establish? Because it seems like they're definitely obviously the main resource you need to build out these.
Yeah. And
To build.
these are highly competent people in their field, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they are high tech. It doesn't mean that they spend their time trying to source the latest innovation. These are people that have been doing trade for 50, 60 years. They're very, very good at what they do, but they don't spend much time on technology. So even there was a suit that I located from an American company, and I thought this is going to be fantastic. We can get all of our aging workforce to wear this, so when they're painting ceilings or putting gypsum board up, a lot of overhead activity, whether they say, for example, drilling into reinforced concrete to put in, anchors for ceiling frames, and I thought this would just be absolutely fantastic option. No one was interested, because you're trying to get someone one or two layers down to be interested, and they're probably not going to spend 20,000 US dollars or whatever it was per worker to have an exoskeleton suit, and the worker themselves would probably find it too hot too cumbersome, and they'd rather just do it the way they've been doing it for the last 30 years. So even your good intentions in this regard are often, you really got to judge it very carefully.
Interesting.
I did have a vision of
So kind of
I did
turning.
have a vision of an army of human warriors walking around, with it's like something from the Terminator, but with hammers and nails and drills. But it didn't quite.
Yeah. Yeah, there was that Tom Cruise, Emily Blunt movie. I'm trying to, the name's escaping me at the moment, where they had that exoskeleton and they're,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
fighting the robots or that kind of, it's making you have like a superpower, a bit of an Iron Man type of
Yeah. The
uniform.
technology's there.
It's there, but yeah, the human factor, and I think it's not just the physical robots versus exoskeletons and people doing the trades manually, but it's also the white collar stuff as well. People are used to working a certain way. It's almost sometimes harder. It's not so much the technology that is the hard part. Technology will always be there. It'll be innovative. People will find use cases for it, but it's a lot of times that change management is getting people to think about
Yeah,
what's in it for them to make the
yeah,
change. And maybe the cost of doing it hasn't quite been seen as high enough for them to switch to a new way of doing something.
yeah. I think the balance is not quite there yet. It's. I mean, let's face it. Electric cars only really took off when someone managed to find that right price point, a decent enough car at the right price point. When Tesla found that and managed to achieve that, that's when electric cars just took off. So it will ultimately happen. It's just not there yet.
So, as a CEO, as a leader in Hong Kong, as somebody who's working in the construction industry, what's kind of top of mind for you in the industry today? Other than you mentioned the shortage of tradespeople, you mentioned technology, and keeping your eye open, which many people wouldn't. Maybe they're very comfortable with not challenging ideas. You're out there looking at Silicon Valley exoskeletons, so that's quite interesting. What else is top of mind for you when you're looking at where things are headed in the next future looking, for the next 5 years?
Well, for us, it's always about trying to find some efficiencies. It's trying to keep your cost base down because Hong Kong is an extremely competitive place, and clients love a bargain. They love a cheap price, and so we're constantly trying to match that quality level that we produce and the service level we produce, which is above everybody else, and managing to keep our price effective because I'm afraid you can't be too expensive. People won't pay a premium for our services. So you have to keep that cost level under control. So we are looking at, where do we get certain things done? Where are our people? What is our real estate footprint? These are all things that we have to be very careful on and make sure that we don't just stay with the old way of doing things. So that that's a very big drive for us. And the other thing is constantly adapting to the work levels, work volumes in the market. Coming out of COVID, we've had a good run of things. There's been a decent amount of work, decent amount of tenders, but it's not back to where it was before. And there are lots of competitors in the market that are fighting for the jobs. So we've really got to be on our toes to make sure that we are the ones that win this work. So that's really a bit.
And you're looking at investments. You mentioned you're looking at investments overseas, and I think you said Japan. I think you had mentioned, or we talked about this before,
Yeah.
and as well as Ireland.
Yeah. So
Any other countries you'd be looking to move into?
no, I mean we try not to stretch ourselves too far. Our knowledge base is very much in a certain area. We're stretching it already by looking at places like Dublin and Japan. We have some development land that we've purchased, which we're looking to work on. So that's really, we're not looking about to go too further afield. We have a good spread of different areas of business now. So a lot of it is really focusing on making sure it works and making sure it's profitable. So that's really a big drive for us over the coming years.
Great. I understand you're also a father. I know your wife, which I've interviewed in a previous episode, so that's also a good one to check out as well. But as a father and a business person, as a leader, maybe you have a bit of advice that we could maybe wrap up the episode with for people that are thinking about considering the construction industry, considering the trades, but also worried about future proof. There's that fear that AI is going to be replacing jobs and changing careers, unrecognizably. What advice would you give to people that are thinking about construction, trade, business? More of the manual labor.
Yeah, sure. We've got three sons, 10 years separating them. So the eldest one at the moment, just at that sort of university stage, and they have some very serious challenges ahead of them, and obviously they're young, so they don't know about them just yet. But if you look at what AI has already done in a very short period of time and what machine learning has already done, it's wiping out whole areas of traditional employment. If you're a designer, if you're a copywriter, if you're in the marketing scene, a lot of what you used to get people to do now, a computer is doing through the use of AI. And things are, I think, they always need a human element to finish them off, and they always need, in many ways, a human element to start them off. But a whole tranche of work in the middle is being done in the matter of minutes through a computer. And all the people that used to be involved in the producing of that work are pretty much without a job now. So I think when you're choosing your career now, I think you have to have you need to be hugely flexible. I think you need to be prepared to maybe start off on one line, prepared to change very quickly, to be very flexible. But I think you also need to have a think about whether the career choice you're looking at is going to be there in 3 years' time or 5 years' time. Maybe keep an eye on the future to make sure that you change quickly enough so you're not one of the ones that have left sitting at your desk going, what happened?
Yeah. And I think maybe that's circling back to your decision, right? You were probably looking back and said, well, maybe I need to go further afield and I'll, go out to the another side of the world to explore what's out there. So
Absolutely.
maybe that's
Yeah.
the mindset that needs to be in place for people, regardless of what industry you're in. I think it's about just being open to new ideas, looking for new areas of opportunities. And it may not be where you're sitting at the moment, and it may not be in the industry you're at. I think with that shortage of tradespeople that you mentioned, there's a lot of opportunity in the
I
industry.
think you've got to be ready to move. You've got to be ready to rethink the way you work. I think you've got to really understand just how focused you're going to have to be to become successful in the future, because there will be lots of jobs, there will be lots of things you can do, but they won't necessarily all be in the same way that's been done over the last 15, 20 years. So you may have to move countries, you may have to move cities. This whole concept of being in one place for your whole lifetime, I think, is pretty much gone. I think you need to ultimately, at the end of the day, the one thing that hasn't changed is you need to work hard. Not that that's not going to change. I think whatever happens, the work ethic is going to be very, very key moving forward.
Great. And not to put you on the spot, but I understand. I think your Cantonese is okay. You speak a little bit of Cantonese. Is that right?
You'd
A
you'd
little
think
bit?
after 30 years I'd be fluent, but I'm afraid I'm typical British. I think we speak slowly and loudly, and that's our foreign language.
Maybe I'll say, maybe you could just say goodbye in a different language or something, or thank you, and just enough to get by. But I really wanted to thank, say I appreciate all the time you've given me today on this call, and look forward to hearing big things out of IBI Group Holdings and yourself, Neil Howard. Thank you very much for the interview today, and let's definitely keep in touch.
Dolce Saison.
Thank you. Bye
Good to
bye.
speak to you, Sean. Bye bye.
Nice to speak to you. Bye.